Have you ever been used in the name of love? Amina stood at her engagement party, humiliated by her future mother-in-law and sister-in-law, called a nobody in front of hundreds. And her fiancé? He just stood there, smiling coldly, but the truth no one expected. Amina was never weak. She was just waiting for the perfect moment to flip the script. She wasn't some helpless girl. She was Amina Kato Okoro, heir to the Okoro Empire, worth 3 times more than the family that tried to crush her. What came next was legendary. With a single word, no, she refused their billion-dollar contract. The Oba family's stock crashed, investors fled, and their empire crumbled. The girl they thought they used? She walked away with her head high, while Kwame, the man who betrayed her, begged for mercy. From just a pawn to a global icon of self-worth, Amina's story isn't just about revenge. It's a masterclass in self-respect. If you've ever felt undervalued in love, don't skip this video, because respect costs nothing. But without it, even empires fall. The chandeliers blazed above like captured stars, their crystals scattering firelight across the polished marble floor. Music unfurled from the string quartet in waves that seemed both triumphant and suffocating, notes climbing and dissolving into the vast dome of the hall. Beneath that brilliance, Amina Kato entered at Kwame Oba's side, her hand resting in the crook of his arm, her gown trailing like liquid ivory across the steps. All eyes turned, not with admiration, but with something sharper, colder, whispers that sliced through the golden air before she could even breathe. Their gaze followed her like a shadow too heavy for one body to bear. The scent of roses and expensive perfume pressed in from every side, yet it was the chill of disdain that made her shiver. She felt the silence before the words, that slight intake of breath before venom spilled. Zuberi Hawani, regal in emerald silk, let her voice cut across the room. So the House of Oba opens its doors to strangers now. A face without history can walk into a dynasty. Her smile never reached her eyes. Every word was dipped in honey, but stung like acid. The room rippled with murmurs, and then Chloe Oba, her laughter as sharp as broken glass, added, "She looks more like the staff serving champagne than the bride-to-be." The crowd smirked, 1,000 silent verdicts hanging heavy in the air. Kwame, dazzling in his tailored suit, merely shifted, his arm tightening just slightly around Amina's, though not in defense. His smile was strained, almost apologetic, but his silence was thunderous. He chose not to shield her. In that moment, the lights above seemed harsher, the music more distant, as if the hall itself turned its face away. Amina stood still, her fingers tightening around the stem of her glass. She could feel the fine crystal threatening to snap beneath her grip, the sharp edge biting into her palm. Warmth spread, a bead of blood blooming quietly against her skin. She didn't wince, she didn't cry. She only lowered her gaze, letting the sting anchor her. A symbol she dared not show, hidden inside her fist, while the world paraded its cruelty openly. The evening spun forward, a blur of applause, staged speeches, and choreographed laughter. Yet to Amina, every sound felt distant, muffled by the roar inside her chest, the weight of the ring on her finger, the taste of iron from the faint cut on her palm, the suffocating perfume of roses. It was all too much. Every glance, every smirk carved deeper lines into her silence. She had imagined an embrace, imagined love sheltering her from the glare. Instead, she found herself alone, surrounded by glittering strangers who pretended to toast her happiness while raising their glasses to her humiliation. Hours later, the hall emptied, its chandeliers dimmed. In the quiet, she slipped into the dressing room lined with mirrors, the echo of music still haunting the walls. Alone at last, she pressed her hands against the vanity, her reflection fractured in the many panes of glass. Her eyes searched herself as if looking for a stranger, someone who could withstand the storm without shattering. The cut in her palm throbbed, a reminder of her silence in the face of mockery, her restraint carved into flesh. She whispered into the mirror, so soft it was almost a prayer. "Do you love me, Kwame, or do you love what I give you?" The question dissolved into the empty room, unanswered, lingering like smoke that refused to clear. Behind her the gown hung heavy like chains, the jewels on her wrist cold against her skin. She leaned closer to the glass, seeing not the poised woman the world expected, but a flicker of a girl who carried scars invisible to the eye. The silence pressed tighter. Somewhere beyond the closed doors, laughter still floated. But here, in the confines of her solitude, it was only the sound of her own breath, uneven, breaking. She let the tears fall quietly, each one a secret rebellion against the smile she had worn all night. And yet, as she wiped her cheek, her gaze hardened. There was no collapse in her, only the beginning of something unspoken. Her silence tonight was not surrender. It was the weight of a tide drawing back before it crashed. The glass still rested on the vanity, a smear of red staining its edge. She looked at it, then at herself, then at the ring. The symbols all aligned, whispering of pain but also of choice. Her heart ached, but her spirit refused to bow. Outside, the city lights blinked in the darkness, indifferent to the battles unfolding in gilded halls. She sat in that dressing room, the question still echoing, heavy as stone. The air was thick with perfume and the faint sting of blood. She exhaled, her reflection staring back with both fragility and fire. Somewhere deep within, a storm began to stir, unseen but inevitable, and with that silence, with that solitary whisper to the mirror, the night sealed itself like a wound that would not heal quickly. The echo of her question lingered, unanswered, but in its weight was the seed of defiance. The chapter closed not with triumph, nor with despair, but with the sharp, aching edge of uncertainty. Whether love could be real in a house built on pride, and whether she could survive the role she had been forced to play. The door closed behind her with a heavy thud, shutting out the echoes of laughter and music still trembling in the grand hall. Darkness wrapped around the suite like a cloak. The perfume of roses lingered faintly on her gown, but the silence here was different, thicker, unbroken, alive with what was left unsaid. Amina's breath trembled in her chest as she stepped forward, heels sinking into the carpet as though every step carried the weight of chains. She had hoped that once the crowd dispersed, once she was alone with him, she would find something softer waiting. A glance, a word, a hand steadying her. Anything that told her she belonged to him, not just to the spectacle. Kwame sat in the armchair by the window, the city glittering behind him like 100 watchful eyes. A tumbler of whiskey glowed amber in his hand, the ice clinking when he lifted it. He did not rise to greet her. He only studied her in silence, his gaze cool and assessing, as though she were a painting he had commissioned, waiting to see if it matched the grandeur of the frame. She hesitated, the air pressing against her lungs, before crossing the room. She placed her blood-stained hand discreetly against the fabric of her dress, hiding the sting from the glass she had broken earlier. She wanted him to notice. She wanted him to see her pain, to reach for her. Instead, he leaned forward, set the tumbler down, and pulled her into his arms with a practiced grace that felt more like choreography than intimacy. His breath was warm against her ear when he spoke. "You're perfect," he said, his voice low, smooth, calculated. "You're everything I needed." Her chest fluttered until the next words fell like stones. "Do you know what you are to me, Amina? You're my greatest project, my redemption. With you, the world sees me differently. Not the reckless heir, not the man who breaks hearts. They see the man who chose the unpolished gem and gave her shine." The word dug into her ribs. Project. It hung in the air, sour as smoke. She leaned back to search his face, but there was no cruelty in his eyes, only pride, as if he had unveiled a masterpiece. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, gentle but strangely distant, a benediction bestowed by someone above, not the tenderness of a man in love. Her body stiffened against him. The hum of the city below seeped into the silence, the muffled horns and engines blending into a dull roar. He reached for the tumbler again, swirling the ice. "Do you realize," he continued, "how they looked at me tonight? The Oba name has never been stronger. I've gone from scandal to savior, all because of you. You're the proof that I can be faithful, that I can build something lasting, that I can change." She tasted bitterness at the back of her throat. Each word wrapped her tighter, not like a lover's embrace, but like a rope disguised as silk. She turned her face away, staring at the city lights. They blinked, indifferent. She remembered the sting of voices in the hall, the way they had stripped her of dignity with a smile. She had endured it because she thought love would cover her wounds. And now she heard the truth, whispered in velvet. She was not a partner, but a symbol, a carefully placed piece in a game bigger than her heart. Her fingers brushed the diamond ring on her hand, cold, heavy, a chain forged from light. She wanted to tear it off. Instead, she gripped it tighter, the gem cutting into her skin, the pressure feeding her silence. She swallowed, her voice barely a thread. "And me? Where do I fit in this story you're writing?" He smiled at her question, that same smile he had worn for cameras and investors. "You're the reason it works. You're the heart of it. Without you, there is no redemption arc. With you, I'm untouchable." He tipped the glass again, the amber liquid flashing in the dim light. His eyes softened, but only for himself. "You've given me everything." The air thickened around her. Her heartbeat slowed to a heavy, deliberate drum, each pulse echoing in her ears. She looked at him, really looked, and saw the man she thought she loved replaced by something colder, a craftsman shaping his legacy, with her as his raw material. His kiss on her forehead still burned, not with warmth but with condescension. Her chest tightened, her lips parted, but no words came. What could she say? That she loved him too much to be reduced to this, that she had given herself completely, not to be displayed but to be cherished? She pressed her hand against her chest, as if she could still hold the pieces together. The silence stretched, broken only by the clink of his glass. She rose slowly, her gown whispering against the carpet, and crossed to the balcony. The city wind rushed in, cool against her flushed skin. She closed her eyes, let it wash over her, let it carry away the sting of the room. She whispered, not to him, not to anyone, but to the night. "If I am a project, then I'll write my own ending." Her voice dissolved into the wind, unheard by the man behind her. He had already poured another drink, his back reclined, satisfied in his victory. Her hand tightened around the balcony rail until her knuckles blanched. Below, the streets moved with tiny lights, endless and alive. She had thought her life would expand here, in the grandeur of Oba, but instead it shrank until she could barely breathe. She opened her eyes, letting the city blur into streaks of light, tears clinging but refusing to fall. Inside, the glass on the table glowed in the dim lamp, amber trembling with each shift. She turned back once, watching him sip his triumph, his shadow stretching long against the walls. And in that shadow, she saw her place, not beside him, but beneath him, a hollow in a story written for his glory. She stepped back into the room, her face unreadable. She moved past him, her gown brushing the rug, and sank onto the edge of the bed. The mattress dipped beneath her weight, yet she felt suspended, as if the ground itself no longer belonged to her. He looked over, his smile lazy, content. "Rest now," he said, as though she were a child soothed by bedtime. "Tomorrow will shine again." She nodded faintly, but inside her chest something cracked. The silence thickened again, wrapping around her like armor. She touched the cut in her palm from earlier, the sting grounding her in the moment. She let the pain root her, a reminder that she was still alive, still capable of choosing. The night pressed on, heavy with the scent of whiskey and roses. Amina lay down beside him, though she felt oceans away. His breathing slowed into steady rhythm, careless and calm. She stared into the dark ceiling, her heart awake, her mind racing. Every word he had spoken circled like vultures above her. Project, redemption, untouchable. She whispered into the night, so low the shadows themselves might strain to hear, "I am not a story you get to finish." Her hand brushed the ring again, then drifted to her chest, clutching the fabric there, steadying herself. Tears gathered, hot and quiet, slipping into the pillow, not of surrender, but of awakening. When dawn's gray light crept through the curtains, her eyes were still open. The city stirred below, unaware of the war waging in the heart of one woman. She sat up, the sheets sliding off her shoulders. Kwame slept soundly, oblivious. She looked at him, the man who called her his masterpiece, and felt a sorrow so deep it hollowed her out. Her lips pressed together, her jaw trembling. But no sound escaped, only the promise whispered to herself, carved into the marrow of her being. If she was a project, then she would decide the ending, and it would not be his. The phone lit the dark like a blade, a thin white line cutting across the ceiling. A name burned on the screen, Makena Jalani, letters clean, elegant, familiar only as a rumor that had hovered at the edge of Amina's life. The hour was deep and airless. The city, with its glitter and horns and hot-blooded engines, had fallen into a heavy hush. Amina lay on her side, eyes open, watching the screen pulse on the nightstand. The light washed her face. It threw her reflection into the black glass. Her features smudged over the name of another woman. She didn't reach for it. She listened to the soft tremor of the vibration, the way it almost matched her heartbeat, the way it stopped, then started again as if testing the room for witnesses. Beside her, Kwame breathed steady. Sleep claimed him with the ease of a man who believed the world bent to his schedule. Amina turned her head toward him, toward the slope of his shoulder, the warmth beneath the sheet. The ring on her finger pressed into her skin. It had left a faint mark she could feel even in the dark, an imprint she could not shake. The screen dimmed, then died. Silence returned. It felt enormous. She closed her eyes and did not sleep. Morning arrived without apology. Sun pressed through the curtains, a pale slice that made dust glitter like snow. Kwame showered. He hummed under the water, something cheerful and slick. When he came out, he smiled at her, kissed her forehead, and reached for his watch. "Busy day," he said lightly. "You should rest." She sat up, drawing the robe tighter. "What's today?" He waved a hand. "Conference, fundraiser, the usual parade. Nothing you need to grind through. Optics are particular. I'll have the car take you to the spa. You deserve it." He said optics the way other people said weather, an external condition he beat with good tailoring and better timing. Her eyes fell to the dresser where an envelope lay beneath his cufflinks. She recognized the crest, Oba Foundation, impeccable linen paper. The flap had been slit open. Inside, a cream card flashed gold letters when the light caught them. She slid it out. Guest seating, table 1, name, A. Kato, Oba, black tie, women in jewel tones. Please arrive by 7 Hoyt for press line. A flourish in the corner, small, italic, like an intimate joke. Panelists, K. Oba, M. Jalani, N. Dumil. Her finger stopped on the second name. She lifted her gaze. McKenna will be there. Wasn't a question. He paused just long enough to place his watch, just long enough for the pause to be an answer. "McKenna's a donor now," he said smoothly. "Different world." He leaned over, brushed her hair back with a soft hand. "You hate these things, love. The speeches, the frozen smiles. Let me take that weight. Let me do what I'm good at." She heard the echo of last night in his voice, the velvet assurance, the promise only half aimed at her. He straightened his tie. She crossed to him, trailing her fingers along the dresser, leaving a faint line in the dust like a signature. "Do I have a seat?" He smiled. "Of course." Then, almost as an afterthought, "We can move things if needed, donor priorities." It was said with ease. It landed with weight. He was already at the door when he turned back. "I'll text you later." She wanted to mention the call. She didn't. The ring dug into her palm as her hand balled without thinking. The cut from the other night had healed into a thin line. It hummed when she pressed. The car arrived anyway. Not a spa run. She asked the driver to take her to the Grand Meridian, where the conference banners hung like a proclamation. The lobby was a cathedral of glass and steel, winter cold beneath air conditioning that smelled like new money and polished stone. Voices climbed the marble columns and melted into echo. Amina moved through it like someone drifting downstream, unnoticed, unmissed. A young man at the registration desk looked up, his smile bright, professional. "Badge?" She gave her name. He typed, eyes flicking. "Of course," he said. "We have you." He handed over a lanyard. Green. Around her, the real guests wore gold. Gold meant tables up front, cameras that found your face when the speech soared. Green meant you could move without being seen. She slid the lanyard over her head. The strap brushed her collarbone. Cool. She stood a moment, watching her breath fog the polished chrome of the elevator door, a private cloud that vanished as soon as it appeared. The doors opened. She rode up alone. In the mirror-paneled walls, her reflection multiplied. Amina, in a dozen boxes, each one holding itself a little straighter. The ballroom on the 10th floor glowed under a ceiling of light that looked like captured rain. People flowed in with the controlled ease of those who always belong. Sharp cologne, freshly steamed silk, laughter pitched low, like secrets traded at market. She slipped to the side, near a line of ficus trees in brass pots, and watched. Staff glided with trays. A woman moved past in a wine-colored dress that pooled like dusk at her heels. Amina traced the length of the room to the front where the panel table sat on a low stage. Name placards waited in a neat row. K. OBA. M. Jahlani. N. Dumil. She watched an usher place a crystal tumbler at each seat, the glasses clear and unforgiving under the lights. She circled the perimeter to the seating chart mounted near the entrance. Names bloomed like a garden of capital letters. Table 1. She found Oba, then Kwame, then the blank space next to him. The card had been removed. Another card slid in its place, just a touch misaligned. M. Jahlani. She stared at the careless slant, the tiniest misfit, the kind of thing only someone looking for their own name would notice. Her mouth tasted of iron for a moment, as though the cut in her palm had opened again without bleeding. The room hushed. The stage lights found their targets. The moderator spoke. Applause rose like heat. Then McKenna entered. The air shifted the way a theater hushes when the lead steps into frame. She wore white that was almost blue under the LEDs, fabric that skimmed her body and caught each light like a net. Her hair swept up, neck exposed, a line of pearls resting like a whisper at her collarbone. She smiled without showing teeth, a practiced softness that said, "I know what you want to see." Kwame followed, shoulders glittering under 1,000 eyes, his grin easy, his stride sure. They greeted one another with a touch that was both polite and something else, a familiarity shaped by hours no one else owned. When their fingers brushed, it looked accidental. It felt choreographed. Amina's throat tightened. She moved closer to a column, pressing into its cool surface. She could smell the wax on the floor, lemony and clean. She could hear the glasses sing against their coasters when set down too quickly. The moderator praised legacies and futures, spoke about capital and conscience as if they were kin. At one point, the spotlight cut across the audience and caught a cluster of men at table 3, Kwame's friends. They raised their eyebrows at each other, amused, smug, whispering with shoulders, not mouths. One of them lifted his flute in a tilt toward the stage, a private salute. "Perfect," his lips said to the man beside him. "Back where it belongs." The second man nodded. The king and the right queen, words, simple, sharp. They didn't have to strike her to draw blood. She steadied herself with the column and forced the world back into focus. On stage, McKenna leaned in when Kwame spoke, the slightest tilt that invited confidences. He turned toward her like a sunflower finds the sun. The audience breathed with them. Cameras kissed their profiles. A photo bloomed on the projection screen behind them without warning. 3 images spliced like a promise. A hospital ribbon cutting, a school courtyard painted in bright, impossible blues, a gala where 2 figures, Kwame and McKenna, laughed at the same time as if sharing an old joke. The caption read, 10 years of impact. Amina felt a chill even as the room warmed under the applause. She backed away, intending to leave before she shattered. The green strap brushed her throat, an itch she could not scratch. Passing the front row, she caught sight of the place cards again. One had fallen, face down, under the table. The edge of it poked from beneath a chair. She crouched as if to adjust her heel. She slid the card into her palm. Her name stared up at her. A. Kato Okoro. It had been there. It had been replaced. Her chest rose. Her chest fell. The stage blurred, then sharpened as though she were underwater, and the surface was far above. She slipped the card into her clutch without knowing why. Evidence of something she didn't yet have words for. A hand touched her elbow, Light practiced. She turned. It was Chloe, the sister, a woman who could order a room with the set of her eyebrows. Her perfume smoked with jasmine and smoke. "Sweet," Chloe said, voice velvet over glass. "You made it. Don't worry about the seating. Fluid night. Lots of moving parts." She smiled. "Enjoy the show." The words were kind. The shape was a knife. Amina nodded. Her jaw ached from holding. When Chloe drifted back to her table, two men leaned in to ask something. Chloe glanced toward the stage, then toward Amina with a look that said pity when the mouth said nothing at all. On stage, the talk shifted to legacy partners. The moderator asked about shared history. Kwame chuckled, eyes on the floor as if modesty had found him. "We go way back," he said. McKenna's smile deepened. "Too far to pretend we don't know each other's worst," she said. And the room laughed. It wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was intimate. The kind of line that works only when the private spaces under it are real. The kind that says, "We have a language other people don't speak." The hour did not drag. It carved. By the time the applause peaked, Amina had curled her fingers inside the clutch so tightly the ring had left another mark. She stood when the room stood, clapped when it clapped, smiled when someone's camera swung her way. Then she slid through the throng, polite, invisible, a green badge passing under gold light. She found a corridor that smelled faintly of cold coffee and carpet glue. Her breath echoed, her heels clicked. She pushed through a service door and found the loading dock. The air hit her face, wet and sharp. Rain fell in thin wires from a low sky that had been building all day, for the right moment to break. She stepped under it and let it happen. The first shock snapped her awake. The second softened her knees. Her makeup bled in quiet streaks she couldn't see and wouldn't wipe away. A taxi idled at the curb, its headlights diffused into halos by the water. Somewhere near, a man shouted into a phone in a language she half understood, a rhythm that rose and fell like a wave she couldn't ride. She stood there until the cold went from outside to in. It felt honest, at least. It felt like something that didn't require performance. Her phone buzzed again. Not a call, a calendar ping. Private dinner. Oba plus partners, 9:30, Suite 48. Guest, M. Jalani. Below it, a text from Kwame. "Be home late. Proud of you today just for being you. Rest." She read it twice. Her thumb hovered over the letters without touching them. The rain found its way into her collar. It slid down her spine like a truth. She closed the calendar. She opened her clutch. The place card was damp around the edges now, the letters blurring just enough to look like they were dissolving. She held it until the paper softened and bent to her grip. Then she tucked it back and wrapped the clutch tight, as if the small kiss of leather could hold a boundary no one else would respect. A memory rose quick and sharp. The first time she had seen her name printed in gold on expensive stock. The thrill of being seen, of belonging. Tonight, the same letters had changed flavor in her mouth. They tasted like metal. They tasted like the tongue biting itself. A black umbrella appeared at the edge of her vision. Chloe again. How she had found the back exit, Amina didn't know. Money had a way of teaching buildings new doors. "You'll catch cold," Chloe said softly, not unkind, as if kindness were a talent she practiced to keep it from going stale. She tilted the umbrella so it sheltered them both. Water drummed overhead, a skin stretched tight between world and witness. "He doesn't mean to hurt you," she added after a beat. "He just forgets where the camera ends." The words were small. They were also impossible. Amina stared at the rain bouncing from the asphalt, like sparks from a broken wire. "I know where the camera ends," she said quietly. I just didn't realize the film keeps rolling when I leave the frame. Chloe studied her face. Something like respect flickered there, or maybe recognition, the way one caged bird looks at another and sees the same bent feather. You should go home, Chloe murmured. Warm up. Tomorrow is big. Her hand squeezed Amina's arm once, the pressure precise, human. Then she slipped back inside, umbrella folding behind her like a closing wing. Amina stayed until her teeth clicked. Then she walked. She turned her face up to the sky and let it rinse what it could. The rain flattened her hair and washed the powder from her skin and made the diamond on her finger look like a shard of ice. Every step felt heavier than the last, not from the water in her shoes, but from the fact of knowing how rooms move, how names shift, how chairs remember who sat in them even when the cards change. Her mouth whispered to no one, "I am not scenery." The words felt strange in the open air, as if they had been waiting inside for a long time and didn't yet trust themselves outside. She reached the curb and raised her hand. A taxi slowed. She paused before getting in and looked down at her fingers. The ring gleamed even under the storm, a thing that desired to catch light even when it cost her warmth. She slid into the back seat and shut the door. The driver glanced at her in the rear view and said nothing. The city smudged by on the other side of the glass, neon bleeding into rain, buildings drooping toward their reflections in puddles that pretended to be lakes. Every stoplight was a held breath. Her phone vibrated on her lap. Another message, not from Kwame, from a number labeled simply M. A photograph bloomed on the screen, nothing overt. A half-lit table, 2 tumblers, a napkin with an O embossed in gold, a smear of red like a mouth touched it. 3 words followed, clean, bright, careful. He's doing fine. She stared at the picture until the pixels sharpened into something she could bear. The taxi turned. The wipers smeared rain into stripes. She typed nothing back. The message sat there, pulsing with its own satisfaction, as the car slid through streets that had seen this all before. When the driver asked for the address, she gave it. Her voice was steady. She tasted rain when she spoke, as if the storm had put itself inside her. The car climbed toward the ridge where their building perched, glass-faced, vain. She pressed her palm to the ring, feeling its ridged setting leave a temporary map on her skin. She would learn to read it. She would learn to walk with it until walking without it didn't feel like falling. The taxi rolled to a stop. The building's entrance glowed like a lighthouse. She paid, stepped out, and stood under the overhang, the rain turning from wire to mist at the edges, where warmth met weather. The doorman nodded, used to seeing triumph enter here and wreckage leave. She offered him a small smile that didn't pretend anything. In the reflection of the glass doors, her face hovered again, layered over the lobby beyond. The flower arrangement on the table, the elevator bank breathing gold, the black marble column that held the ceiling up like an oath. She took a breath that hurt, and then another that hurt less. The ring felt heavier than it had an hour ago. The card inside her clutch grew softer by the minute. She looked at the keys in her hand, silver teeth glistening, waiting. The elevator chimed somewhere above, a sound like a bell in a chapel where no one prays anymore. A breeze funneled through the entrance and lifted the hairs at the back of her neck. She turned toward the corridor that led to the private lifts, her heels tracking a faint wet path on the stone. Outside, thunder stitched 2 clouds together. Inside, the lobby hummed. The next breath she took tasted faintly of jasmine she couldn't place. It was probably nothing. It was probably in the flowers. She closed her fist around the keys until the edges pressed small truths into her skin. truths you can feel but cannot yet name. Then, with the rain still dripping from her hair and the city still clinging to her clothes, she stepped forward toward the door that would open, sooner or later, onto what belonged to her, or what only pretended to. The first thing she saw were the shoes, a pair of glossy stilettos, black lacquer, arched high as if sculpted to wound. They waited on the living room rug like silent witnesses, too elegant, too foreign to belong to her. The apartment's light slanted across them, soft gold spilling from the floor lamp, and for a moment Amina thought she had walked into a stranger's home. Then she heard the low murmur of voices, a laugh, a pause, the unmistakable cadence of intimacy. Her breath snagged in her throat. The key still hung loosely from her fingers, dripping faint water from the storm outside. She hadn't expected warmth, but she hadn't expected this. Betrayal displayed so brazenly, it became decor. She stepped inside. The lock clicked behind her, a sharp punctuation. In the armchair, Kwame lounged like a man rehearsing his ease, his jacket off, his tie loose, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to mimic relaxation. Across from him, Makina perched on the edge of the sofa, her posture both casual and deliberate, a pose designed to be remembered. The crystal glasses on the coffee table glowed faintly, 2 rings of condensation staining the polished wood. Amina's pulse thundered. She could smell perfume not hers, something heady and floral, laced with smoke. It clung to the air like a confession. Kwame lifted his gaze. No startle, no guilt. Just that faint smile he wore when closing deals, the one that covered teeth with charm, but hid the jaw tightening underneath. "You're home early," he said. His voice was smooth, too smooth, as though he had rehearsed this line as well. Makina turned her head, her lips painted wine dark. She didn't rise. She didn't even look embarrassed. Her hand rested lightly on the sofa cushion, fingers tapping once, twice, like a silent metronome. "I thought we had an agreement," Kwame continued, his tone almost amused. "You'd give me space to work. Optics, remember?" The word hit her again, as it always did, stripped of tenderness. Only strategy. Her eyes dropped to the stilettos again, gleaming like polished weapons. She could taste iron at the back of her throat, the phantom of blood from nights before. Her hand clenched around the keys until the edges bit into her palm. She whispered, though not to them, "This is home." Her voice trembled. He laughed softly, as though she had said something naive. "Home is an idea, Amina. You're a role in that idea, and you've played it well. But his hand gestured lazily toward Makina, as though introducing royalty. "She is where I come from. She is who understands the world I live in. You should have known." Makina's smile flickered but didn't falter. She shifted closer to him, her dress whispering against the fabric. She reached out, touched his hand, and left it there. No attempt to hide, no attempt to soften. The silence between them said more than any vow he had given Amina. The city outside hummed through the glass walls, indifferent, lights blinking like witnesses who had already given up hope. Amina felt her lungs fight for air, each breath shallow, ragged. She wanted to scream, to throw the glasses, to demand answers. Instead, her fingers drifted to the ring on her hand, heavy, cold, chains disguised as brilliance. She began to slide it off. The diamond caught the lamplight, scattering prisms across her palm. But when it reached the knuckle, she stopped. The cut from before had reopened, a thin bead of red glistening against her skin. She pressed the ring back down, hard, until the wound stung. It was no longer a jewel. It was proof. of what she endured, of what she would remember. Kwame tilted his head, amused. You don't need to make a scene. You've always been dignified. Don't ruin it now. His words settled like ash. She lifted her eyes steady. Dignity isn't silence. He blinked, surprised by the firmness in her tone, but his smile returned quickly. He leaned back, his arm brushing Makina's shoulder as though to remind her, and Amina, where his comfort lived. You'll understand in time. This is bigger than us, bigger than love, bigger than betrayal, a world where people were tools and roles were handed out like scripts. Amina turned, her gown brushing the shoes on the rug. She felt the sting of humiliation burn her throat, but she did not collapse. She walked toward the door, each step a strike against the silence. Behind her, Makina's laugh rang out, soft, triumphant, a melody that stung more than any insult. The sound clung to her as she gripped the handle, her knuckles white, her chest hollow. She didn't slam the door. She closed it with a steady hand, the click final, the corridor beyond dim and cold. Her reflection stared back at her from the dark glass of the elevator, blurred, fragile, yet holding something sharp beneath. The ring pulsed against her finger, warm with blood. She clenched her hand, hiding it from the world. When the elevator descended, the hum of machinery sounded like a dirge. She pressed her back against the mirrored wall, her breath fogging faintly. For the first time, she let her tears rise, but they did not fall. Her eyes burned, but her cheeks stayed dry, as if her body refused to give the world the satisfaction. The car jolted to a stop. The doors opened onto the lobby. She stepped out, heels clicking against marble, her head held higher than her heart. The night air rushed in as she pushed through the glass doors. It was cool, damp with the memory of rain. The city lights stretched wide before her, glittering like a kingdom she did not belong to. Her chest ached, yet she walked with measured grace into the street. Cars hissed past, tires spraying water from gutters, horns blaring in the distance. She felt the weight of eyes, imagined or real, on her back. They weren't the mocking stares of the gala, nor the pitying smiles of Chloe. These eyes were invisible, heavy, carried by the city itself. She whispered to herself so low that the wind almost swallowed it. I will not be erased. The words settled into her bones like fire. She walked on, the ring biting her finger, her silence a shield. Every step away from that apartment deepened the wound but also sharpened the edge inside her. She carried the perfume of betrayal on her clothes, the sting of blood in her hand, the echo of laughter in her ears. Yet beneath it all, a rhythm began to build. Not despair, not surrender. Something else, something waiting. The street lamps haloed her in fractured light as she moved forward, her shadow stretching long across the wet pavement. She did not look back. The night did not soften, and in that relentless dark, a seed of defiance stirred, hidden but alive, demanding to grow. The applause thundered before she even stepped into the hall. Flashbulbs cracked open the dark like shards of lightning, scattering across polished marble and sequined gowns. The air was thick with perfume, champagne, and the faint metallic tang of microphones waiting to be fed. Amina stood just outside the gilded doors, her palms damp against the clutch she held, the diamond on her finger catching the glow from the chandeliers. She hadn't wanted to come, yet the family had summoned her like a pawn called back to the board. Tonight, she was told, was about legacy, about money, about optics. Her own will didn't matter. Not here, not yet. Inside, the world moved in a rhythm orchestrated by the Oba family. Waiters glided with trays, strings swelled from a hidden orchestra pit, and voices lilted in practiced laughter. But beneath the music was an edge, a hunger. A billion-dollar deal lay heavy in the room, invisible but suffocating, pressing against every smile. Zuberi Hawani sat at the head of the long stage, her gown glittering like armor, eyes sharp as if she had planned the evening down to the last breath. Beside her, investors from 3 continents leaned forward, waiting. The contract rested on the table, white paper glowing under spotlights, the black ink of signatures already lined like soldiers. Only one space remained blank, Amina's space. She felt it from across the room like a tether around her throat. She entered, and the crowd shifted as though a new scene had begun. Whispers followed. Cameras clicked, capturing her in angles meant to confirm her place, her duty. Her gown shimmered in silver, but she felt the weight of ash. Kwame was already at the podium, his voice smooth as poured wine. Tonight, we celebrate not only the future of the Oba name, but also the unity that binds us with our partners across oceans. His eyes found hers. A smile touched his mouth, but it wasn't the smile of a man welcoming a woman. It was the smile of a man presenting proof. And none of this would be possible without the woman at my side. My bride-to-be, Amina. The spotlight fell on her. Applause rippled, sharp, expectant. She walked forward, each step echoing like judgment. Zuberi's gaze locked onto her with a steel-cold demand. Chloe leaned close to an investor, lips brushing his ear, laughter spilling sweetly. But her eyes were on Amina, gleaming with disdain. Amina reached the table. The pen lay there, weightless in appearance, but heavier than iron. The contract was spread open, numbers dancing in neat rows, commitments, promises, chains disguised as opportunity. The room leaned in, breath held, waiting for the moment she would bind herself with ink. Zuberi rose, her voice velvet over steel. This is the culmination of vision. The Oba name will rise higher than ever, not through arrogance, but through unity. And tonight, our beloved Amina will affirm that promise. She extended a hand toward the document. Sign, child, show them the strength of family. Her tone carried no doubt, only command. Investors nodded. Cameras clicked faster. Even the orchestra quieted, strings silencing mid-note as though the music itself bowed to the moment. Amina's hand hovered. She touched the pen. Its surface was smooth, cool against her fingers. She glanced at Kwame. He smiled, lips tight, eyes sharp. "This is why you're here," he whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "This is the moment that proves everything." His words slid into her skin like needles. For a heartbeat, she thought of storms past, of the cut on her palm, of the laughter in Makina's throat. Pain and silence wrapped around her. She almost believed she would sign, almost believed surrender was inevitable. But then she looked up. Beyond the contract, beyond the cameras, she saw the reflection in the mirrored wall at the far end of the hall. Her face framed in light, but hollow-eyed. She did not see a bride or a partner. She saw a token, a figure meant to make other men richer. The realization spread through her like fire catching dry grass. She closed her fingers tighter on the pen. The room leaned closer. 1,000 eyes, 1,000 breaths. Then she lowered her hand and simply nodded. No signature, no ink, just a slow, deliberate nod, as if yielding. The crowd exhaled, misreading her silence for consent. Zuberi's smile sharpened, triumphant. Kwame's hand rested lightly on her shoulder, a display for the cameras. Investors clapped, convinced. For a moment, everyone believed she had accepted her role, but inside she did not. The nod was not surrender. It was strategy. She had chosen silence again, but this silence was different. It was a veil, a mask, a waiting storm. Her heart pounded, her throat burned, but her eyes did not lower. She met the gaze of the mirrored self across the hall and held it, steady, defiant. She whispered inside herself, a vow no one else could hear. I will decide how this story ends. The music swelled again, champagne glasses lifted. The deal was treated as sealed, though the paper lay untouched. She smiled faintly, just enough for the photographers. They saw what they wanted to see. The Oba family saw a pawn finally in line. What they didn't see was the way her hand trembled, not from fear, but from holding back the storm rising in her chest. She tucked the pen into the fold of her gown, hidden, claiming it not as their tool but as her weapon. The orchestra returned in full force, drowning the subtle tension, but Amina heard it, the silence beneath. She felt the tremor in her own body as she turned toward the stage lights, her face a mask of grace. Her heart throbbed against her ribs, echoing the rhythm of the applause. The contract remained open on the table, blank space still hungry for her name. And though no one noticed, that emptiness burned brighter than any signature. It was proof that she had not yet yielded. She left the stage to another storm of flashbulbs. The crowd cheered as though they had witnessed unity, but Amina carried a different weight. Her silence now carried power. Her nod had deceived them all, and as she stepped down, she felt her chest tighten, the edges of tears pushing, not from weakness but from the unbearable knowledge of what she must still endure. She walked through the crowd, cameras chasing, investors smiling, but inside she whispered to herself again, steady and clear, not yet, but soon. The music reached its crescendo, drowning the hall. She paused at the edge where shadows stretched long across the marble, and her gaze drifted back to the contract, gleaming under the lights. Her name still absent, her fate still unsealed. She closed her eyes, let the noise wash over her, and held on to the silence she carried, sharp and heavy. When she opened them again, her face shone under the flash, unreadable, untouchable, but her heart thundered with the certainty of the storm she would one day unleash, and in that moment, as the crowd erupted in applause they thought belonged to her obedience, Amina stood alone in the quiet within herself, and chose defiance, hidden but alive. The cameras burst like gunfire, white light exploding against her eyes. Amina stood center stage, the pen cold in her grip. The contract spread before her like an altar. The orchestra had fallen into silence. The crowd leaned forward as if a single body, every breath suspended, every gaze piercing her skin. She could hear the thrum of her own heartbeat, louder than the applause that had died moments before. Her name was a blank space waiting to be trapped in ink. Her life narrowed to the single stroke of her hand. She raised the pen. Flashbulbs ignited again. Voices rustled. A low wave of anticipation rolling across the hall. She could feel sweat gather at her nape, sliding down her spine under the heavy fabric of her gown. Kwame's hand brushed lightly against her back, the touch firm enough to be seen by the audience, soft enough to seem intimate. "Do it," he whispered through his smile. His breath was warm against her ear, but his words carried ice. "This is what you were made for." Amina froze. The light was too bright, the paper too white, the silence too sharp. She felt as though the entire room had closed around her. and then like a blade through the haze came the thought. No. The word pulsed inside her chest with a rhythm stronger than fear. She straightened, her fingers trembling, and then she lowered the pen, not to sign, but to rest it deliberately on the table. The murmur surged, a cough from the crowd, a ripple of unease, and then her voice, steady, cutting through the air. My name is not Amina Kato. The room gasped, 100 intakes of breath swallowed by the cavernous ceiling. The investors shifted in their seats. Cameras whirred frantically. She felt the heat of the lights, the weight of silence pressing down, but she kept her chin lifted. My name is Amina Kato Okoro. I am the heir of the Okoro legacy. She let the words strike like thunder, her voice resonating against marble and glass. The name hit them where they least expected. Okoro, a dynasty older than Oba, wealth threaded deep into the veins of the nation. It wasn't just a name, it was a history, a power, a truth they had tried to bury. Kwam's smile died. His hand dropped from her back as if burned. Zuberi's face blanched under the chandeliers, her composure cracking for the first time. Chloe's laughter stuttered into silence, wine trembling in her glass. The investors looked at one another with raised brows, their interest shifting, recalibrating, the scent of opportunity mixing with fear. And then came the twist. The words she let fall like a blade against the billion-dollar contract waiting at her fingertips. I will not sign this deal, not tonight, not ever. The hall erupted. Voices tumbled over each other, half in outrage, half in disbelief. Cameras strobed until the room felt like a lightning storm. Zuberi slammed her hand against the table, her rings clattering like bells of war. You ungrateful girl, she hissed, her voice carrying despite the chaos. You would destroy what generations have built? Kwame turned toward Amina, his eyes wide, his jaw trembling, not with grief, but with panic. He reached for her hand, tried to pull her back toward the contract, whispering fiercely through his clenched teeth. Do you realize what you've done? You've ruined everything. She looked at him, really looked, and for the first time saw no lover, no partner, not even an enemy. She saw a boy wearing a crown too heavy, terrified of losing the shine he had borrowed from her. She pulled her hand back, slow and deliberate. No, she said softly, though the microphones caught every syllable. I've ruined nothing. I've only ended the lie. The crowd surged louder, the sound a storm battering against the chandeliers. Reporters shouted questions. Flashes burned her vision. Investors barked into phones, their voices rising in different tongues. Chloe disappeared into the wings, dragging Makina by the wrist, their hurried steps echoing against the wood. Zuberi's chest heaved, her mouth open, but no words came. Only rage pulsing red across her face, and Kwame, standing beside Amina, sagged as though his bones had given way, his eyes hollow. His lips formed a plea, but the words were drowned by the storm around them. Amina did not flinch. The pen still lay on the table, untouched, gleaming under the lights. The contract fluttered faintly in the draft from the ceiling vents, pages rustling like wings desperate to fly away. She stepped back from it, her gown whispering against the marble, her pulse steady now. The decision was done. The silence she had carried for so long had shattered, and in its place was truth spoken aloud. The storm had broken, and she had chosen her side. The room spun around her, the voices a roar, but in her chest there was only stillness, heavy and fierce. She turned, the spotlight following, her face captured in every camera lens, her eyes steady as stone. For a moment, the chaos blurred, the flashbulbs dimmed, and she felt only the weight of her own breath. She had burned the bridge. There was no return. And yet, in that destruction, a strange lightness rose in her, a freedom she had never tasted. At the back of the hall, a door slammed, echoing like a gunshot. Security pressed forward, unsure of whom to protect, whose power to obey. The orchestra tried to resume, a confused swell of strings, but the music faltered against the roar of the crowd. Amina's gaze drifted once more to the blank space on the contract. Empty, waiting, refused. That emptiness was hers now. It belonged to her, not to them. She walked off the stage, the pen still glinting where she had left it, her heels striking the marble in slow, deliberate beats. Every flash caught her. Every voice followed her. But she did not look back. She carried only the sound of her own words ringing inside her chest, louder than applause, louder than rage. My name is Amina Kato Okoro. The cameras would spin their stories. The papers would call her mad, reckless, a bride who betrayed a dynasty. But tonight, in the glare of 1,000 eyes, she had claimed herself, and as the doors closed behind her, sealing the chaos inside, her breath came heavy, shaking, filled with both terror and triumph. She pressed her hand to her chest, where her heart thundered, and whispered into the empty corridor. So this is what freedom costs. Her tears came then, not of regret, but of release. They cut down her cheeks, hot against the cool air of the hallway, salt against her lips. She walked alone through the shadows, her gown heavy, her shoulders light. The storm inside her had spoken, and though the world outside raged, she had stepped into a truth that could never again be silenced. The headlines bled across every screen before dawn. Oba dynasty shaken. Okoro heiress walks away from billion-dollar deal. Bride turns stage into battlefield. The words glowed from televisions and hotel lobbies, from phones clutched in trembling hands, from the ticker tapes in the financial district that streamed disaster in red letters across glass towers. By morning, the empire that once seemed untouchable had become fragile, trembling under the weight of exposure. In the Oba residence, silence reigned where celebration had been prepared. The dining hall, long tables stretched and candles melted halfway, still bore the scent of roses. But the flowers had withered overnight, their petals drooping, water in crystal vases gone murky. Chloe sat with mascara smudged, her laughter extinguished, her hand gripping a phone that buzzed without pause. She had no words for the numbers flashing across the screen, Oba shares diving, investors withdrawing, calls unanswered. She only watched as names disappeared, one after another. Partners who once boasted of loyalty now retreating like shadows at dawn. Zuberi Hawani stormed through the hall, her gown from the gala still clinging to her shoulders, sequins dulled by the light of morning. Her face was tight, pale beneath the powder, her lips bitten raw. She struck the table with her palm, the echo rattling silverware left from the abandoned feast. She has destroyed us, she spat, voice breaking, the velvet edge gone, only venom left. That girl, that nothing, has pulled the ground from under us. Her words rang hollow, because every soul in the room knew the truth. It wasn't the girl who destroyed them, but the lie they had built on her silence. Kwam stumbled in from the veranda, tie loosened, hair wild. The night had hollowed him. His shoulders sagged as though the world had climbed onto his back. He fell to his knees before his mother, his voice hoarse. "We can fix this. Mother, please. We can find her. We can—" His words tangled, broke. Zuberi turned, her eyes two sharp blades. You let her into this house. You thought you could tame her. Now she has revealed herself as an Okoro. Do you know what that means? Do you understand what power she carries? What it costs us? She shoved his shoulder with her hand, the sound of her rings scraping his jacket like teeth. You've ruined everything. Kwam's lips trembled. He pressed his forehead against the floor, his voice barely rising above the static hiss of morning rain against the windows. I love her, he whispered. His confession fell flat, a pebble into a vast void. Chloe barked a laugh, hollow and sharp. You love her? Is that what you call it, Kwame? You paraded her like an accessory, and when she revealed who she truly was, she stripped you bare. Love didn't save you. It unmasked you. Kwame raised his head. His eyes glistened, desperate. A drowning man reaching for air. She can save us. If I go to her, if I show her my heart, she'll see. He broke off, choking on the words. The storm outside seemed to answer him, thunder rolling low and merciless. Meanwhile, the outside world sharpened its knives. At the stock exchange, OBA shares plummeted in real time, numbers flashing like screams. Reporters clustered outside the gates of the estate, cameras bristling, voices chanting questions. The OBA crest, once a mark of majesty, now shimmered on every newspaper with headlines of collapse. And yet, in the chaos, one photograph spread faster than all the rest. Amina standing at the podium, her eyes fierce, her lips parted with the declaration of her name. A figure caught between light and shadow, a woman who had refused chains. They called her the heiress, who said no. Inside the house, the storm boiled hotter. Zuberi paced like a caged lioness, her fury breaking into sharp bursts. Chloe wept quietly into her phone as her own social circle abandoned her, invitations rescinded, friends suddenly unreachable. Makina was nowhere to be seen. She had slipped away in the night, leaving no trace but the ghost of her perfume on the sofa. Kwame rose from the floor and staggered toward the door. I'll find her. I'll tell her she's my life, not just my salvation. His words cracked, but the desperation was real. Zuberi's laugh was bitter, heavy. She is not your salvation. She is your reckoning. But he was already gone, running into the storm, the rain soaking his suit within seconds, his heart thundering in his chest. He found her hours later, not in the estate, not in the halls of Oba, but in the streets where cameras still lingered, reporters hunting her every move. She had stepped out of a car, face bare, gown replaced by a simple dress, her ring still glinting but her posture untouchable. The crowd pressed in, voices shouting questions, flashes burning, and there he was, Kwame Oba, once untouchable himself, now wet, trembling, broken. He dropped to his knees on the slick pavement before her. The cameras surged closer, the storm above crackling as if the heavens leaned in to watch. Ah, Amina. He gasped, voice cracking, carrying through microphones and the roar of rain. I love you. Please, don't leave me. Don't let them take everything. I can't breathe without you. His words, raw and shaking, splattered into puddles with the rain. He looked up at her, eyes wild, searching for a lifeline. His hands reached, desperate, trembling. The world held its breath. The investors watching from their screens. The journalists poised with pens. The family hiding in their crumbling mansion. And Amina herself standing in the storm, water streaking down her face, her hair plastered against her cheeks. She looked at him, really looked. For a heartbeat she remembered the warmth she had once believed in, the nights she had whispered love against his chest. But then she saw the truth in his eyes. Not devotion, not sacrifice, but desperation rooted in fear of loss. His words weren't love, they were survival. Her lips parted. The rain poured harder, drowning even the camera shutters. She shook her head once, slow, final. "If you loved me," she said softly, "you would have stood for me before I stood against you." Kwame's face collapsed, crumpling under the weight of her refusal. He sank lower, his forehead pressing to the pavement, his body shaking with sobs. Around them, flashes burned, the storm wailed, the city recorded every second. Amina turned, her dress clinging to her, her shoulders straight despite the weight pressing from all sides. She walked through the wall of cameras, her figure blurred by rain and light, leaving him kneeling in the wreckage of his dynasty. The world saw it all, the rise, the fall, the collapse of an empire undone not by enemies, but by the truth spoken by one woman. And as she disappeared into the storm, the question hung heavy in the air, unanswered, electric. What would she build now, free of chains, when the empire she had rejected lay in ruins at her feet? The ring lay on the table like a shard of ice catching the first bruise of daylight. Its brilliance had dulled under the gray of morning, a jewel meant to bind now, nothing more than a relic. Amina stood over it in the quiet of the Oba dining hall, the scent of extinguished candles still lingering in the air, roses wilting in crystal vases that no one bothered to refill. She placed the ring there gently, as though setting down a stone that had weighed too heavily on her hand, then stepped back, her shoulders squared. She did not need to say goodbye. The gesture was enough. Outside, dawn unrolled across the horizon, pale light cutting through the last veins of storm. The estate gates, once fortified by pride, now rattled with the press of reporters. Voices called her name, cameras angled, microphones jutted forward like bayonets. But when Amina emerged, she did not flinch. She walked through them as though through tall grass, their questions brushing her skin without breaking it. Some shouted accusations, traitor, destroyer. Others called her heroine, heiress, savior. Both were masks she refused to wear. She gave them nothing but silence, her stride steady, her chin lifted against the light. The headlines had already chosen their titles. Some called her the bride who brought down a dynasty. Others named her the face of defiance. Yet as she crossed the threshold of the estate for the last time, she knew she was not theirs to define. Every flash that struck her became less a cage and more a mirror, reflecting their hunger back at them. She had been spectacle long enough. Now she would be something else. In the city, billboards still bore the Oba crest, but beneath them men in suits hurried into offices, their calls frantic, their faces pale. The Oba stock line plunged red on screens, each tick downward a knell. Investors spoke of betrayal, of panic, of legacy undone. Yet in the margins of the same papers, editorials began to appear, praising not ruin, but courage. Words like dignity, autonomy, truth threaded her name into sentences she never asked for. In one cafe window she passed, the front page was plastered with her image at the podium, eyes fierce beneath the glare of chandeliers, lips parted around the name Okoro. Someone had scrawled across it in marker, "Respect." She didn't stop to read. She walked until the city quieted, until the neon dissolved into sea air. The shore stretched wide, sand damp from rain, gulls scattering in the thin gold of sunrise. Her heels sank into the earth. each step releasing the weight of marble floors and velvet halls. She reached the edge where waves curled and hissed, salt mist clinging to her skin, her gown hem darkening as the water kissed it. Here, there were no cameras, only wind, only tide, only the sound of her own breathing blending with the sea. For a moment, she closed her eyes. The ocean smell was sharp, briny, alive. She inhaled it deep, tasting freedom on her tongue. When she opened them, the horizon burned brighter, the sun clawing its way up from the deep. She thought of the contract left unsigned, the empire crumbling behind her, the man she had once believed in kneeling in the rain. A pang of sorrow pressed against her ribs, but it was not regret. It was mourning for what could have been, for what love might have offered if it had not been poisoned by pride and performance. She let it pass through her, a wave receding. Her phone buzzed. A message from a journalist she did not know. "You are the symbol of self-respect this country needs." Another from an investor. "Meet to discuss future projects under Okoro name." She scrolled past them, each one another attempt to claim her story. But then came one message, unsigned, anonymous. A single phrase, "Respect costs nothing, but without it, empires fall." She stared at it, the words bleeding into the light, her breath catching. It was not threat, not plea, simply truth, a mirror to the vow she had carried inside her. She slid the phone into her bag, letting the words root in her chest. Behind her, the world debated whether she was savior or sinner. Ahead of her, the sand stretched clean and wide. She chose forward. Each step left an imprint that the tide quickly erased, yet the act of walking mattered more than the mark left behind. She smiled faintly, the first true smile she had allowed in weeks. Not of triumph, not of revenge. A smile born of release. The wind tugged at her hair, salt sticky, free. The waves roared, carrying away the echoes of her silence, her tears, her fear. She would not return to the Oba mansion. She would not sink back into the velvet cage of another dynasty, even her own. The Okoro legacy waited, yes, but she would shape it on her terms. No staged photographs, no gilded contracts dressed as chains. She imagined schools rising where towers had failed, voices heard where silence once ruled. She imagined dignity given room to breathe, even if it was not hers alone. The thought steadied her. The sun climbed higher, scattering the last gray from the water. Amina lifted her face into its warmth, eyes closing against the brightness. The ring lay behind her, abandoned on a table in a house, already rotting from within. Ahead, the horizon stretched boundless. She whispered, just for herself, a vow carried away by wind and wave. Respect costs nothing. Without it, even empires collapse. The words lingered in the salt air, then disappeared into the roar of the sea, and with that, she stepped forward, her figure small against the expanse of ocean and sky, yet unbroken, untouchable, beginning again. When all the noise fades, when the lights dim, and the echoes of applause die away, what remains is not the grandeur of palaces or the glitter of wealth, but the quiet weight of dignity. Human life is not measured by the empires we inherit or the contracts we sign, but by the courage to stand upright when the world demands that we kneel. True strength does not shout. It is born in silence, in the steady choice to honor one's own worth, even when the cost feels unbearable. Every generation is handed a story already half-written, with expectations inked in margins and roles whispered into our ears. Yet the deepest act of freedom is to take that pen and write a new ending, one not dictated by fear, but shaped by integrity. Respect is the simplest gift we can give to one another, and yet it is the rarest currency in a world drunk on power. To give respect freely is to recognize the humanity that binds us all. To deny it is to build castles on sand, destined to crumble with the tide. We are reminded, too, that love without respect is only possession dressed in tender words, and success without integrity is only failure gilded in gold. The world may call for compromise, for silence, for surrender, but the quiet voice within us, the one that insists on truth, is the only compass worth following. It is in choosing to listen to that voice that we step into the fullness of who we are. What endures is not the applause of crowds or the fleeting wealth of dynasties, but the invisible legacy of those who chose to live authentically. Every act of courage, no matter how small, sends ripples outward, breaking illusions, healing wounds, and reminding us that the human spirit cannot be caged forever. Dignity may be mocked, tested, even crushed for a time, but it rises again, because it belongs not to the powerful, but to all of us. And so, the story closes not with triumph written in marble, but with a quiet promise written in the heart, that the measure of a life is not what is taken from us, but what we refuse to surrender: our self-respect, our truth, our humanity. Thank you for listening, for walking through this journey with open hearts. If this story touched you, I invite you to share your thoughts below, to let your voice join the conversation. And if you wish to continue exploring more tales like this, filled with echoes of truth and the resilience of the human spirit, please follow, comment, and subscribe. Your presence keeps these stories alive.